Before the dawn of man, the gods of Mount Olympus waged war against a race of giants called the Titans. But two Titans, brothers Epimetheus and Prometheus, sided with the Olympian gods. Together, the Titans were defeated and driven into the eternal hell of Tartarus. To show his gratitude, Zeus gave the brothers the task of creating all living things. Epithymus made the beasts of land, air, and sea, and Prometheus made the first human out of mud. Zeus grew jealous of man and forbade the use of fire on earth. Feeling sorry for the plight of humans, Prometheus resolved himself to aid them. He broke into Athena's workshop on Mount Olympus and stole fire. He gave the fire to mankind and with it taught them to make tools and weapons. And with these, humans dominated the natural order of the earth. In gratitude, humankind hailed him as the pioneer for their rapid spread of civilization. Now Zeus was angered by the theft, and he banished Prometheus to the east and chained him to a rock. He sent an eagle to eat out his liver every night, and during the day, Zeus made sure that Prometheus' liver would grow back. Every night the eagle would return, and every day his liver would grow back. Eternal torture for the man who would dare give humans the power of gods. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 1 of the Energy Talk podcast. My name is Olubimo Lajide and I will be your host. The story you've just heard is one of my favorite myths. It's from the Greek mythos of Prometheus, and it tells a very interesting story of a conception of how man first came across fire. And this story is very important because it draws parallels to some very, very important ideas. One of the most important is the role that energy plays in form of fire in the story, in the development and the rapid growth of the humankind as a community and as a modern civilization. So I would go as far to say as fire is the first energy source that mankind used because it's the most effective. The early man used fire for simple things like heating and for cooking. But by the very definition of what energy is, fire would not be the first. Humankind have always had access to the physical energy we produce when we move from our muscles and also from animals as well to do work. But what makes fire more important, more necessary in our development is no matter how strong a man is, I've never known a man to punch water until it became hot. That is a special characteristics that fire has, and going forward we will discuss about how this first source of energy became the basis of which every other form of energy is being judged by. Now, as I said before, I believe this story to be very, very much a myth because as fantastic as it may be to picture this epic scene of Prometheus escaping from Mount Olympus, fire in hand, covered by the shadow of darkness, it couldn't be probably farther from the truth. The fact is, as humans, we've taken a bit more ownership about our own development. So although fire wasn't exactly this grand gift, it was something that was probably discovered either from a lightning strike hitting a tree or just from a couple of cavemen banging some rocks together. We can get into conspiracy theories about this, but that isn't the most important thing. The most important idea to take out of it is the importance that fire and energy, how important they've played, the roles they've played in our growth as humans, because let's be honest, mankind is largely unremarkable apart from our intelligence. We're not the strongest species on the planet, we're not the tallest, we're not the fastest, but because we've been able to harness energy and transform it into fantastic tools and build cities and come up with concepts that are pushing us further and further and further towards something that we're not sure ourselves. This is what has set us apart and what continues to drive our innovations, sometimes a bit too quickly. So, our conversation today will be revolving around our history with energy, where it all started from, and where it's all going. So, an interesting fact, the name Prometheus actually means foresight. And if you know about what's happening in the energy economy, the global economy, and the energy mix today, you would agree that foresight is something that we could use a lot of. So, as we get into this conversation, I hope you can get a better understanding of how important energy is and just where we need to be going together in order to ensure we have a sustainable and hopeful future in the years to come. So let's get back into reality now and take a look at what our energy history has been since a long time ago. So I'm going to divide it into two time periods, two significant ones. So first, we're going to start with the shorter of the two, which is before the 18th century, and I'm putting a lot of years together in this group because, as far as technological developments around energy and energy infrastructure, it was a largely quiet time period. To just give you a basic summary, it was mainly coal and wood. Yeah, that was about it. And of course, there were other energy sources being used, like wind for sailing and the early windmills, and some smaller, more archaic harnessing of other energy sources, is like solar, for instance. The Greek used solar in their homes to have sun roofs, basically, so they can have light in their homes when it was light out. But of course, when the sun went down, that was pretty much it. There was no modern wind turbines or solar PV panels or many of the things that we take for granted now as far as the renewable side is concerned. But we've always been very, very well aware of the non renewable energy sources that we had in terms of burning wood and burning coal, which was pretty much enough to cover most of the needs of the basic man. So I like to think that our energy transition has been due mainly to necessity because I don't know if you would agree with me, but I would say that as people, we tend not to do things without proper motivation, meaning that we need incentives to actually change or to adapt new technologies or new ideas. So the first set, let me put it that way, before the 18th century, the only reason we moved on to coal and other biomasses like peat was because we're running out of trees. Yeah, that's as simple as it was because if we use trees as a resource for a fuel source to keep energy going, to heat our homes, to cook our food, very soon you would realize that the larger city got, the more people lived in one area, the more wood you would need. Basically, the more fuel you need. And this also translates to modern times, but let's stick with this for now. And the more trees you cut down, the more you realize that trees are not a very effective method of supplying energy and supplying heat and using forgeries and everything. So we had to move on to something else, and that something else was coal. And this might not be the most popular opinion right now, but per unit volume of fuel is perhaps one of the most effective uh, energy sources that we have. It's one of the oldest and it's one of the longest enduring. To just give you a perspective, at every point in modern civilization, we've always used coal to generate energy and modernly to generate electricity as well. And every major developed country or civilization did use coal to start off their industrial revolution. and that gave them a massive um, leap in development over countries that didn't have that kind of early adaptation of coal. So that was basically everything before the 18th century, a largely uneventful time as far as energy was concerned. But as we move into the 18th century, now this is where things start to get interesting because the world again moved on from coal because the harmful effects of coal became quite obvious after a few hundred years of use. And you had cities basically covered in smog, and it became hard to have clean air. So, air pollution, and basically having workers in the mines and people in the factories getting sick. And it became obvious that, okay, although coal might be effective as far as energy production or energy efficiency, it has severe social economic costs that in some cases should or do outweigh the actual cost benefit. But this argument becomes difficult to make depending on how high up the corporate ladder you are. Because if a person is just looking at the bottom line, then it was a largely profitable venture. But for the people lower down the ladder, the people who had to work in the mines and in the factories, they suffered greatly from the health disadvantages that came along with working close to coal. And the we moved on to a new energy source. Specifically, the date that we would attribute to this is 1859, which was the year that the first oil well was drilled. It was drilled, no surprise, in America, Pennsylvania, and it was by a man named Drake. I forgot his first name. I probably should have checked that up. But this was the start of the new era of energy production, and it had oil leading the forefront. And from that date, 1859 to 2019 now, it's still a battle of coal and oil, but it's gotten a bit more interesting than that. Now we have other energy sources that are coming up, and we have more incentive to develop those energy sources. And of course, the incentives that I'm referring to is in form of climate change. And regardless of what you think you heard or what you might believe about this, this is something that's a real issue. And I don't think anybody who is responsible in the energy industry would deny the fact that in order for us to maintain our place as both residents of this planet and the most developed species, that we need to become more effective and more responsible with our energy usage, because over the years our energy demand has only gone up. We'll get to that in a bit, but first let's just look at how the energy breakdown comes about in the pre 18th century timeline, because it's really very interesting. So we still have coal, which still provides at least 30% of the energy demand of the energy production that we have, and this is just something that I don't think we can avoid. There are lots of innovations right now, a lot of ideas to move away from coal, but we will talk about that in a bit. It has to do mainly with the effect of climate change and also the Paris Climate Agreement, which is an interesting piece of policy making which affects basically every country on Earth. And we have solar, which is the become the face of renewable energy. And although solar has a very promising um, future, it's still not where we need it to be today. Investments in solar energy has largely stalled in the past 3 years, and in order for it to become more effective, we need to solve problems like how to properly store the energy produced from solar cells and how to just have it work all around, because as the name implies, it's solar, which means it traps energy from the sun, and the sun isn't always going to be around every time in the day, and it's not something that's geographically possible in every country or every city in the world. And then we have natural gas, which of course is a byproduct of oil. And there's some people they're saying that natural gas is the fuel of the future, and they do have very good points to make in that argument, but it's still under the fossil fuel category, which means that there's still going to be some greenhouse gas emissions, most notably methane. It's not exactly CO2, but methane is just as harmful, if not more. But there are some techniques in order to prevent the release of methane because there are new technologies being worked on, specifically carbon capture and storage, which is another largely underfunded piece of technology, unfortunately, in the last 3 years. But it's something that could become a solution for us in the future. And we also have other renewables such as hydropower, which is very location dependent, but the locations where they do exist produces very efficient, very clean energy that can power a lot of cities, appliances, and the rest. But it also has to do with like the ecological effects because if you move away from the environmental effect with climate change, now we talk about like the marine wildlife and how the fishes react to having dams blocking off the waterways or having turbines spinning in the current. So every energy source we have kind of has its own, let's say, hiccup. So there is no perfect solution. And then we have nuclear. So I don't feel qualified enough to talk about nuclear energy, but I think that's a bit of an advantage because in relations to the world production of energy, nuclear plays a very small role in it, and because of its incredible capital it needs to be put in place and the amount of regulations that are behind it, and also the fact that nuclear technology has been used for designing weapons and just the murky history behind it has not given it the best public perception, even though it might be one of the most promising energies for the future. But the fact is, unless nuclear gets a huge PR boost in the next few years, it's not going to play such a big role in the foreseeable future. And I would love to be proven wrong throughout the course of this podcast because this is a long-term view. And all the energy sources I'm listening today, I would love to see how they develop over the years. And I look forward to bringing it to you as well. And we'll move on to the next one, which is wind. So wind with turbines is extremely fascinating because it can give energy to remote places, and this is where things get interesting. So although the argument for renewable energy in terms of wind and solar is very difficult to integrate into the existing energy systems in, let's say, cities and the rest, in more rural areas that don't necessarily have access to a stable electricity grid, developments of renewable energy sources can go a long way in actually aiding these communities and giving them access to electricity that they don't have. Because, again, let's just do a little bit of like quick review about how the energy demand goes. Most of the demand for energy, as no surprise to all of us, is going to go to the developed countries and the world superpowers, which is largely in North America, in China, in some parts of Asia, and in Europe. So you have countries like the Middle East, specifically South Asia, like countries in that region, and we have sub-Saharan Africa, which means that every country in Africa that's not in the north, and that contributes quite a lot of the world population. And most of these people still live in areas that are comparatively remote and do not have access to energy. And that makes up just about a billion people on the planet that do not have access to energy. And this is 2019, so if you don't have access to things like 24-hour power supply for you to do things or access to the internet, it gives you a very, very huge disadvantage in terms of just like the growth of your economy or as your business or personally how much you can learn or how much you can improve. So it kind of puts like this cap on things. And this is something that many people take for granted, specifically in the countries that I listed before that have the most developed, the most energy consuming, and the most pollutant uh, emissions in the world. Because if there's a large demand for energy, then there's probably going to be an also large amount of harmful emissions being made in those countries. But that's not the topic for today. I'm just going to stick to what we have planned. Next episode, we actually have an interview with a person who does extremely good work in South America. His name is Andres, and he works with this company called EcoSwell, and they do sustainable energy development and community development as well. And they have this model that they're using to just show the effect that how small technological innovations in rural areas can have such a huge impact on their lives, because people in those areas don't have massive energy needs like we do. They don't have a Netflix shows to catch up on all the time. They don't have huge appliances. They don't need lights on all the time. They don't have the need for many of the leisures that we've gotten so used to in the more developed parts of the world. So there is a good argument to be made in terms of where energy investment should go and how quickly the changes should be made. So this is episode one of the podcast, and this is just an introduction to what we're going to be discussing throughout the span of this podcast, which I hope it has a very long lifespan. If there is ever a word to describe me, I think at this point it would be an energy nerd. I don't know if that group exists, but that's really what I am, because I believe that there is a fantastic story to be told in the energy industry and in our world today as we react to our growing energy demands and all the problems that come with that. Because although we have the established energy sources in terms of coal and natural gas and oil, and we have infrastructures that revolve largely around energy production, and this again is what makes us special as humans. We need to have effective production of energy, and we need to be using it in the right places in order to have the most efficient use out of every bit of energy we produce. And in truth, I maybe don't believe in a future where we have just one energy source that provides the answer to all the problems, because as far as I have seen in what I've read and in what I have the interviews I've listened to, it seems largely unrealistic. But I do see a future in which we can have more efficient use of the energy sources that we have. Maybe reduce uses of the ones that are not so good for the environment, because the reasons for that should be quite obvious. But going forward, there is a lot of arguments to be made for every single one of the energy sources I listed out in the middle of this podcast episode. And it really excites me because I hope over the next few weeks to be bringing on guests who are experts in the field to talk about things like renewables, like wind and solar and hydroelectricity, and also to have people from the oil and gas sector talk about oil prices and geopolitics revolving around oil. And in the future as well, maybe we can have people to talk about things like space travel and new and exciting innovations in industries like aviation and the car industry and truck industry and the marine industry, because unless we address every single point in our large global infrastructure, they would not be a proper solution to the energy problems we have today. So I am extremely excited to be bringing you everything that I have planned, and I hope that I get better. This is the first episode, so please don't judge me, and please don't leave too quickly. Give me time. Subscribe. I would love to have you on the journey, and as I get better, I hope you come to appreciate the arguments that I bring on to this show, and you come to better understand the role you can play as an individual, as a member of the community you're in, and just as a person with an internet access and a voice, because it's going to take all of us to make the changes we want to see in the world. And this is just a platform for me to tell you probably where it's best to put your energy. So, once again, my name is Olubimi Olajide, or you can just call me Olu if that's easier for you. This has been the Energy Talk Podcast, episode 1. So, please get back to me. I would love to hear feedback. Leave comments, give us a rating. Please, 5 stars wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'm excited to bring you more episodes. So, thank you for listening and have a nice day.